Recently, there was a video doing the rounds from the Otoy people. These are the ones who've been doing the Gene Roddenberry archives, and they've done these little short snippets of films with insinuating a narrative throughout the lore of Star Trek. And they recreated Spock there. They had an actor stand in for the late Leonard Nimoy, of course, and yet it looked like Leonard Nimoy standing there and all that. And apparently there was, of course, AI and CGI and all that stuff at play, but also some makeup and whatnot, and a guy who resembled him and this sort of thing. But anyway, the end result was excellent. It looked beautiful. They found an actress to play the role of Ensign Colt, who's the cute little redhead from The Cage, and she played a role in this. And they incorporated stories not just from the shows and the films, but from novels and comic books. And in her character in particular, in a 90s comic book that followed the adventures of the Captain Pike era of Star Trek, and where there was this alien artifact that involved time travel and this sort of thing. And they've weaved that in. And ultimately, the most recent one was bringing back Captain Kirk. And they recreated William Shatner from the different eras that he appeared, but most notably from the last appearance he did as Captain Kirk in Star Trek Generations, where Kirk seemingly died at the end of the movie. Here, it suggests some sort of resurrection took place. It's not just time travel and stuff is suggested. They show Gary Mitchell appearing very godlike, and you could suggest that even despite the fact that he lost his fight with Captain Kirk in Where No Man Has Gone Before, the second pilot of Trek, with all the power he had, it stands to reason that maybe he did resurrect from that and lives on. And realized, hey, I can't be a vengeful god or whatever. And then he feels bad about what happened to Kirk. And so he reaches out across time, perhaps, and snatches Kirk from death and sends him into the future, where he's reunited with Spock as Spock lay dying in his final hours. And it's sort of it's a send-off and a tribute to those heroic characters from the original Trek run, and it's a goodbye scene, really, but it's also within Trek and how things are going. There's elements, scenes, Easter eggs, and even a character that appears. And it's called Unification, but it appears to entail the latest Trek iterations from Kurtzman et al. To be incorporated into the narrative, despite you just write them off as alternate timelines and universes. But it's like, oh, well, there's crossover or whatever. But nevertheless, it's a cool setup, a cool brief moment of those scenes, and it's cool to look at. And the other films all put together is very interesting to look at, but it's also a testament to the technology and whatnot and what's possible. That being said, I think it's best as a tribute rather than constantly mining this to resurrect this stuff, these characters, so they'll look like they originally did and all this sort of thing. It's not going to stop it, because eventually I'm sure the technology will get to the point where it's very simple to do. What other tales could you tell with these characters when so much has already been told anyway? But I suppose if they wanted to do adaptations of novels and this sort of thing that Trek had that never saw the screen, could be revisited and that sort of thing. But it always has this pull. Of course, it's nostalgia, yes, but there's always this emotional tug on it to see this. Meanwhile, not long after the Kirk video was posted about, got a mention of a colorized version of the second Doctor, Patrick Troughton's Doctor, of the War Games, which was his Doctor's the last adventure he had. Now, it'll be cut down to 90 minutes. It's a very long series, but there's a lot of repetition in it. I love the War Games. It's a great Doctor Who adventure, and was the final adventure, of course, for the second Doctor. And but it was black and white in those days, and now they've colorized it. And from the brief snippets of the trailer and a lot of the stills, looks really good. There's a few scenes here a little wonky and whatnot, but that's to be expected. But overall, the colorization abilities is getting really good, especially the scenes which is at the end of the show when they're on Gallifrey and they meet the Time Lords and all that. It just looks like it's shot from the later eras of Doctor Who when it was in color, and it's really great to behold. But it's also, again, that full. It's not quite on par with the technology necessary to de-age Captain Kirk or put his face on another actor to act out the part in those scenes and all that. But here, you get to revisit old heroes in that. And I think that's more of the power to it, and especially at a time when these franchises are theoretically still going on. They're just not going on well. And so missing what once was is even more so. Of a fictional character, of characters who never really existed, and yet they're close to one's heart, And that, of course, is the power of nostalgia and the pull of it. The promise that it can go on is a powerful one to wield. But when you don't deliver, oh man, does it really burn bridges to your audience? And that's been happening over quite a few years. So all of this, I recall when Star Wars brought Luke Skywalker back at the end of the second season of The Mandalorian. And at the time, The Last Jedi had come out, and I felt that was the hydrogen bomb to the franchise, and I still think that the damage done was so great that I really didn't see Star Wars recovering. That moment right there proved me wrong. Of course, it was sabotaged later with the Gina Carano stuff, and then the later projects, the few that were delivered, were just... they weren't any good, and with a few exceptions here and there, but for the most part, terrible product, and really no hope at all. So they had a moment to right the ship, and it was and this was how it was done. Now it's the current technology and whatnot. As it gets better, it looks better, and all of that. But I remember the emotional reaction that I was not expecting, even though I'd heard rumors there would be a Luke Skywalker scene in it, and I didn't know what it would consist of. And even what was done was a little more than I expected. It was still all very brief, but nevertheless, the power it had, and what it is it's akin to an old friend who's gone. Now these are fictional characters, so of course it's the power of nostalgia and whatnot, but it's also once a loved one has gone, they've passed on, and all you have are your memories, that desire to have one more conversation, to meet them one more time. And of course, if you're a believer, the afterlife, heaven, and all that is the hope that this will occur for you. But nevertheless, the desire is still there. And through escapist fantasy in this, with these fictional characters, there's a means by which it can be provided with the promise that a beloved character or an entire franchise or whatever has returned and will continue, and that sort of thing. And that's the power to it that was abused by the current era and tossed aside, taken for granted, and burned. Primarily these three, it happens to other franchises, Marvel and stuff like that, but for these that were established a long time ago, with Star Wars actually being the youngest of the three, and with that promise that was a bait and switch, and you were lied to and cheated, creates a very sore wound. And yet, after all of that, seeing something like this, it still has that draw and power, but it's based on what the property really was. who these characters were and what they were really about. And it's the notion of it that still holds sway over anything else you've done when it was all lackluster and slapjob work. It really puts the stark contrast on display in these moments of getting that also powerful opportunity to revisit old friends. And it's not as good as what the real thing would be, but unfortunately that's at least not in this lifetime possible. But nevertheless, that is the emotional tug and power that it has. And when that gets abused, the damage is severe. Of course, the counter is, well, we were pushing for a new generation and all that. Yeah, but you purchase old franchises like that because of the built-in audience and the excitement they're in, which would be based on a promise. You're getting more of the same, and then you lied, so that's the severe damage. And then there's nothing, and you can't even get anyone interested because this excitement's all gone and it's all negative and everything. So that's more akin to what happened, but it's still the illustration of the power that these myths had, and it is akin to the fantasy of visiting an old friend that was long gone.